Charisma is not about being extroverted. Charisma about being interested. To be interesting, you be interested.
100% agree. She says to be interesting is to be interested. This is the same concept that Chris Williamsworth would call reverse charisma, where we're not trying to be cool. We're not like magicians, like doing all of our party tricks. Instead, we're trying to make other people feel cool. And then reciprocity kicks in and they just enjoy being with us. So how do you get other people to talk so that you can make them feel heard and appreciated? How do you get them to say something so that you can disclose that you think that something is interesting? And then they feel interesting, then reciprocity kicks in and now you're the interesting one. I want to suggest two basic tactics. One is nonverbal cues and two is pulling the thread or just questions. Questions with pulling the thread as a follow-up tactic. So nonverbal cues, just doing stuff like smiling, eye contact, tone of voice, watching the words that you use, being sensitive and adaptive to the words that they use. So like someone who doesn't swear, maybe don't swear around them. Someone who does swear, maybe try not to be like overly, like restrictive on your words around them. If you can adapt your vocabulary to mirror. So mirroring is an important technique here. So once they start, and then the second is just ask them questions. Okay, so they're comfortable to share because they feel like they're with a real human and whatever. And then you're asking them questions, and it can start with small talk. You can start with like, hey, how was your weekend? And then they washed their car. Oh, tell me about your car. So you pull the thread and you follow up, and then you try to find something genuinely interesting, and then you can say, tell me more. Or you can redirect to an adjacent thing that you think is a shared interest. So maybe you don't care so much about cars necessarily, but you think like AI is really cool. Well, we can bridge from car to, hey, what about like Tesla autopilot or something like that? So you can try to think of adjacent topics and pull the thread and use follow-up questions. Now, this will get you into the state where you are charismatic by reversal. Okay, so they're feeling appreciated, they're feeling heard. That's good. This is already good. You're building social capital. This is already good. But a problem can happen if you are a chronic hype person, if you are too nice and you're always getting other people to brag. And what if you're in a group with like 5 people and now 3 other people are looking cool, but you're not the one looking cool, and zoom forward in your career and they're all getting promotions and you never got the promotion. Why? Because you're always playing the supporter role. You're always hyping people up, and sometimes you get that reciprocity, but it's not 100%. And then sometimes you basically get neglected and taken advantage of. So at some point you need to advocate for yourself, right? So how can we use questions to advocate for ourselves? This is the second big part of this video that I want to get into. And the idea is that you can exercise influence by proposal using questions. So instead of saying, Jim, do that, Sarah, do that, and trying to boss your way around, especially if you're early career, this skill is called managing up or influencing up. So if you're late career, sometimes you can get away with being bossy because you're kind of the boss. You still shouldn't, but sometimes you can get away with it. You're still going to have better outcomes if you use soft skills like influence, informal communications and stuff. You're still going to have better results, but sometimes you can get away with being a bossy if your title is like boss. You're not going to get away with it if your title is like early career person, right? So, but in both positions, you can actually choose the better skill. So the better skill in both positions is to create internal motivation on the part of other people. Instead of trying to extrinsically motivate and transact and force your way to success, try to get other people interested in your goal. And so there's a bunch of rhetorical tactics to do this. But basically, one of the ones that I think is super powerful is using questions. And I'll just give you a simple example in the interview for this. So thinking about a technical interview, maybe you get a question and it's an elite code algorithm question. And you get an input argument, which is a list of data. And it's initially ambiguous what sorts of data are allowed. Maybe it's strings, but does it have to be UTF compliant? Is it A through Z? Is it always lowercase? What about empty strings? What about nulls? What about numeric like 1, 2, 3? So if it's initially ambiguous, you could do a couple things. You can ask clarifying questions. That's already the best practice. But the other thing that you can do is you can propose by question. You can say something like, hey, I think we can just go along assuming that these are alphanumeric. Does that sound good to you? Okay, so I'm asking you a question. I'm getting your buy-in, but I'm actually proposing something with my question. All right, and so that's the other technique that I wanted to reveal to you. So that's just a case zoom into an interview, but really this is super powerful throughout your career. Instead of trying to tell people, well, I think we should do this. Instead, use questions, and then they will get feedback, and then seriously consider their feedback, and you can often integrate it. This is where the power move comes in. They don't have to say yes or no, right? You can use an open-ended, a non-yes or no question. So I can say, well, I think we should move forward with alphanumeric. What do you think about that? And then maybe the other person says, yeah, but also allow for empty strings. And then I can say, okay, and now we have a mutually agreed on solution and we can move forward. That's the big key, is that these questions can create buy-in between multiple parties to an agreed on solution. So you can use them for discovery, and you can also use them for creating buy-in. And none of this is threatening, right? That's the key, is that if you take on the bossy approach where you're just telling people what you should do, it's threatening, it's antisocial, people don't want to agree with you. But if you use questions and you create buy-in, then you can get people to agree with you. And this is like basically how you get to advocate for yourself, and you get to influence your preferences throughout an organization. So anyway, hope that was interesting. By the way, you can use AI tools like language models, including Latterly's language model, to role play these situations, build your soft skills, communication, interpersonal communication, proposal by question, consensus building, leadership, influence, etc. So follow if you're interested in that.